morning, everybody.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Have a go at my not very interesting screen share. It just says part 2. But at least people will know they're in the right place. Oops, don't want that yet.
I thought I would go ahead and get some cookies and I completely forgot all about it.
I find that the most irritating thing about not being able to be in the same room as people is I'm a big cake and biscuit maker, and to training I always take a pile of things and bribe people to give me a good report by giving them biscuits and cakes, but can't do that at the moment. So
this worked. The picture worked.
I had your voice in my head last night. Sally had to do a report late last night.
Oh my goodness, did you?
To the legal team, and it was a desperately fast one I had to do.
Oh gosh.
And seriously, I had you saying about the introduction, the background and all the rest of it, and what you actually want at the end of it. And it was like, yes.
Oh good. Oh, I am pleased. Yeah. With some use.
I'm waiting for the legal team to come back now.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. Serious stuff. I always look like I'm looking to the side. No, I am looking at people. Don't understand how it works. Oh, that's a bit better. Do you think we should get started, Nayoka?
I think we should. We have a few. Before we, while the presentation is on, could you please put in your name, organization name and email address in the chat?
I haven't even got my name on, so
I'm Nyoka, or it would really help even if you put it, with the name at the side. You rename yourself if possible, but I'd really like if you could put it in the chat box so I can collate the data for later. Thank you so much. On to you, Sally.
Well, Nyoka sounds very organised, doesn't she? I'll see if I can sound equally organised.
I guess I had a good bath in the morning, so feeling nice and fresh.
That's what does it. Well, I haven't got a bath, unfortunately. There isn't room for one of those on a boat. So, but I do long for one. It's the thing I really miss about living in a house. So good morning, everybody. Really, really glad to have you back with us. If you're not here, then I'm really sorry that I put you off so much, but you can't hear me saying this anyway. Lovely to see you all. We're going to press on quite quickly today. I hope you will excuse me gabbling, but I don't want you to miss out. And we didn't get quite as far yesterday as I'd hoped. I'm not going to be using Jamboard because I don't think people liked it. It was too difficult. But I would say, if this world is going to go on as it is, with using all these new technologies and online facilities, do have a look into Jamboard. It's part of the what's it called, Google Suite that most people have got on their computers anyway. There are other versions, other similar facilities, but they tend to be even more complex than Jamboard. Jamboard is very, very simple. And once you have got the hang of it, it is very easy. So I would say have a look into it, but I've scrapped it for today so that we don't get too hung up on trying to do things that stop us actually doing the learning and pressing forward with that. So I am going to gallop through it. Thank you for your contributions in terms of questions and yesterday saying what it was you wanted to get out of it. I hope I'm going to cover everything at least briefly. The one thing I'm not going to look at in any detail is what I call data visualization, which is, doing nice graphs and bar charts and pie charts and putting statistics into a nice format like that. I'm not going to cover that, A, because I haven't got time, B, because I'm rubbish at it, and C, because there are other people who do it and do it really well. And the people, if you haven't heard of them, that I would strongly recommend are called DataWise, who are part of Superhighways. And they are a charitable organisation, and DataWise is a London project trying to improve digital use in the voluntary sector in London. And they are utterly superb, best training I've ever done. They do all kinds of stuff, but it includes data visualization. Most of it's free. And at the moment, obviously, it's online, and they are superb at doing the online stuff. They just know all the technical stuff and manage it wonderfully. And they're really, really nice people as well. So I strongly recommend them. Okay, we're going to press on. Would have done this on Jamboard and you'd have had to do something, but as it is, you only have to look at something. So I'd like you to have a look at my picture here. And if you've ever done anything vaguely therapeutic, which is my background, you might have seen a kind of a cartoon version of this. I didn't actually mean, this is a cake I made some time ago for a Christmas event. And I didn't mean it to look like the evaluation thing that I'd done in the past, but all my therapy friends went, oh, that's just like that. Because on the therapy one, it's about how you're feeling. If you're feeling on, sometimes it's on a tree and it's got all these people in it, and you circle how you're feeling. So if you're feeling on top of the world, you'd go here at the top. So what I'd like you to do is just to take a few seconds staring at that and think, with regard to report writing and how confident you feel and how knowledgeable you feel, where would you put yourself on here? Would you be on top of the highest snowball declaring, yay, I've got it? Would you be maybe just lounging about at the bottom here? Would you be standing on your head, perhaps in despair or perhaps in delight? Would you be hidden away at the back where no one can see you? Where would you be if this was a these snowballs were metaphorical report writing and you were climbing over them? Just keep it in your head. I'm not going to ask you, but you might be aware of that. And if you want a copy of that picture, let me know, and you can think later where you are at the end, and you can also use it for anything you want to, if you like. Okay. Do you remember yesterday, at the end of the session, we divided into groups and we were looking at what is observation and what is, excuse me a moment, I'm just trying to change how I see you all. What is observation and what is a comment or analysis, yeah? And two different groups looked at these two different passages which do tell the story of the same event. So the first one, I won't read them, you can read them for yourself, but the first one describes Katie, who's it's not based on well, it is based on a real person. It's actually based on my husband, who fell off his bike while cycling down the towpath. But I've made it into a female. So Katie was cycling along, struck a branch, fell into the canal. Two people picked her out. And then there's a second version of it, which I hope you can tell the difference. And what I was hoping you'd have time to do, but I don't think you did yesterday, but hopefully you all thought about it in your head, is to think which bits of these are pure observation. And by pure observation, I mean, if you were to describe the weather, if someone said, what's the weather like today? If you said it's raining, that would be an observation. If, however, you said, oh, it's dreadful weather, that would be a comment, your opinion, an analysis, yeah? So if you were to highlight in both these passages just the observation, you would end up with that. So you can see in the first passage, the observation and the comments are mixed up. That will happen sometimes, and I'm not saying it's an absolute no-no. But what I am saying is it can sound better and be neater for the reader and more easily understood if you keep comments separate from the observation. So you'll see here, Katie was cycling on the towpath when her handlebars struck a branch. Yeah, that happened. If you were standing there and looking, you would have observed that. But that hadn't been cut back by the volunteers. It's really you just guessing maybe what had happened. You didn't observe that the volunteers walked past it and left it. So that's your opinion. Then it says because of the weight in her backpack. That again, that's you surmising that might have been why it happened. That has a place. Your surmising has a place in a report, but it's not an observation. And then she was thrown from the bike, landed in the canal waters. She was extremely shaken. Extremely shaken is a little bit towards a comment, but it is an observation if you could see that she was very shaken. But thankfully in itself, that's your opinion. Somebody else might not have liked Katie and been really glad she fell in the canal. But so that's your opinion. Thankfully, not seriously hurt. That's an observation. A couple of, it's a bit colloquial, but 2 boys helped her out. That's what you observe. Very kind boys. Again, that's your opinion. I'm sure they were very kind, and they were when they dragged my husband out of the canal, and his bike. But that is an opinion, and it's not a strict observation. So you can see in the second passage, the observation is completely separate from the opinion. And it goes on more, it's a longer passage because the opinion and the comment is expressed a little bit more professionally, but it's the same information. So it says she was cycling along the towpath, bumped into a branch, fell in the canal, 2 boys helped her out, quite shaken. But then the branch would normally have been cut back by the volunteers, so they're going to get a letter. We're getting into conclusions and recommendations. Might have been her backpack. She was lucky not to be hurt. And now they're going to encourage her to not carry a backpack on her. I'm imagining now it's a child or somebody with a disability or something. So she's going to be encouraged not to carry items on her back. And the boys have been identified and they'll get a letter of thanks. So I hope you can see there that there's a difference between strict observation and a comment or analysis. Both are important, but it's very easy if you mix them up to make something that is your opinion or your conclusion sound like it's an observation, and it's not. It's just what you've thought in your head, which may be very correct, but it's not an observation. Going to whiz on now and look at evaluation. I think I confessed yesterday that evaluation is my thing. Monitoring, evaluation and outcomes measurement. And so I'm a little bit biased towards it, I suppose, but I hope you'll forgive me because I do believe that it's a really important part, certainly of a project report, which a lot of people talked about doing yesterday. You're reporting back to funders or other stakeholders on a project that's taken place. And part of that report is to report on the evaluation. And that means 2 things. One is to report on the evaluation tools you used. So how did you evaluate it? And the second is to report on the results of that evaluation. I haven't sent to Toby, who helped us out yesterday. I know he's going to send stuff out to you, and I haven't sent him an evaluation report template, which is something I use a lot. If anybody would like one, just let me know. I'll email me and I'll send one to you. Not everybody's cup of tea, but it is mine. So when you're you need to do an evaluation, obviously, or collect the information ahead of the actual end of the project and the report writing. So you should have that information at the ready. If you forgot, or you hadn't yet learnt about evaluation, there are sometimes ways of scrabbling around and collecting bits of information. But it is obviously a million times easier if you do it in advance. So consider what information you will need and consider how you're going to get that information. Doesn't need to be massively fancy with loads and loads of tools in place. But you do need to think about those things. What information do you need? How are you going to get it? Monitoring is mainly about numbers. How many people came? What kind of people were they? Categories, numbers and categories. Feedback is what in business they call customer satisfaction, user experience, how your participants or beneficiaries got on with things. And an outcome is the change that takes place as a result of the work that you do. And that is crucial. And that's the main thing if you're reporting on a project that you will want, the main information you will want to collect. What is different about the people you help now at the end than at the beginning? Hopefully, if you're working, for instance, on social isolation, at the beginning, they were all very sad and lonely and at home, didn't mix much. At the end, they've got friends, they go out, they socialize, they feel better. Yeah, simple as that. That's an outcome. I want to do a little outcomes exercise. If you go to chat, you will find I have put a link there. And I'm hoping it will take you to a page. I'm scared it won't, but I'm hoping it will take you to a page. It was the very first thing in chat this morning. I don't know if anything's been added. And it'll take you to a page that has a chart that looks like this. Yeah, we're not dividing. I was just checking whether we were dividing into groups. We can all work on that chart at the same time because of the magic of the shared drive. So what I'd like is you to, you'll see on that chart this table here, and I'd like you to add to each column or any of the columns. You don't feel you've got to complete the thing, but have a think about, this is my pretend project up at the top. It's a housing project. Pretend that this is the project and think about what information would you need to collect in terms of monitoring, feedback, and outcomes, and then think about how you would collect that information. So how you would collect the monitoring information, how you would collect the feedback, and how you would collect the outcomes information. Have a go at chucking things into that table. If you follow that link, it's not rocket science. Don't feel I'm going to sit and criticize what you do. It really is quite simple and straightforward. I'm going to stop the share just for a minute so I can go on that drive and just see how you get on for next couple of minutes.
Sally, this is the link that you posted right at the top, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, the first thing in the chat this morning at 9:58 a.m. So if you just click on that link and it will take you to just an A4 sheet with a chart in it. And just have a go at thinking, what information would you need to collect and how you would collect it.
Sorry, Sally, the earliest that I've got is 10:01 and I can't get the link.
Oh, did Nyoka,
Yeah,
did you just
that's
say you'd
basically-
did you just say
I
you'd
reposted it.
reposted it? So it's just
Oh,
been
okay.
posted.
Thank
So it'll be at
you.
the bottom of the chat now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. One or two people have had a go. Not many people have, and I don't know if that's because I'm making no sense or the technology is defeating us, or people are just preferring to read and not add their own things. So do let me know if you're struggling, and do let me know if I'm not making any sense, and I'll try and clarify. Or you can use the comments, the what you call it, chat, or you can just shout if you want. Don't feel you have to sit in silence all the time. But what we have got, if you've still got that open, is we can see the ideas are starting to come. You can keep this link. I'm not going to close it down even after the session. You can even download that chart if you want. And you can see that we're starting to build some ideas about the information we might need to collect. So we've got added the type of tenancy, how long it took for them to be housed. How would we collect that? We'd have an electronic record, we'd have some case files, a spreadsheet. So all of that, obviously you'd need to think about quite hard before you start the project, so that you could collect that information on the way, and then you can put it into your report at the end. As I said before, if anyone didn't hear me, sorry, I'm just putting my face back on. If anybody didn't hear me, before. If you would like a template evaluation form from me, let me know and I can send you one. Okay, so if you remember, we were working through the various parts of a report, and we've got now as far as evaluation. So I'm just going to put the thingy bob back on. So we've done that. The next one is analysis and comment. Bear in mind that this structure and this order isn't written in tablets of stone. You can mix things up a little bit, but it's just one I found useful. So this one is after you've described everything that happened, which you remember we did earlier. You've also described how your evaluation of it, how many people came and what they thought of it and the change that took place in them. So now you're ready to draw your conclusions. You're now ready to say, well, what we saw was people came along to the sessions, really enjoyed them, and it made them happier. But now you're going to talk about how you've reached those conclusions. So you're going to evidence really what you're saying as at the end of this report. Very important to connect up what you've reported on and the conclusions you've come to. So don't just say people came along and smiled a lot in your description bit, and then say the project was a real success and everybody's happy. You've got to show that you've got to describe how people came along and smiled a lot, which we believe is a good indicator that they were enjoying themselves. And they also reported back in the evaluative methods that they were enjoying themselves. We saw changes in them, and we saw people interacting more and getting out more. And we therefore conclude that it was a great success and we made a big difference. So you're linking up what you say in your description with the conclusions you reach. An analysis sounds a little bit complicated, and the word itself can sometimes put people off this bit. You see, I've done a picture of Freud doing an analysis section with somebody. That's just me trying to be clever with my pictures, but it's not that kind of analysis. It's where you explore and tear apart what went on and show how you've reached your conclusions. It's just it's almost your thinking process or your discussion process with your colleagues put into the report. That's all it is. When you have said what when you've described your analysis, you then need to summarize those conclusions. And that's the bit that comes under conclusions at the end or towards the end of a report. This is where you effectively repeat what you've just said, but in a very summary form. You don't go into all the description of it. You just say, so what this report shows is that, males respond better to the sessions we held than females, something like that. The broad conclusions you've come to, you're summarizing them up. People will sometimes jump to the conclusion at the end of the report. So bear that in mind. It's the bit that most people will read. They might not read all the other stuff you've carefully written and worded and added pictures to, but they will jump to the conclusion, just, get to the point. What did you find out as a result of this project or whatever it was you were doing? Don't introduce anything new here. If it's in the conclusion, you should already have described it. It's a summary of what you've already done. So you're basically saying, we wanted to do this, we set out to do this, this is what we actually did, and this is what we learnt. So it's just a summary. That's your conclusion. And then you go on to recommendations. I've put here, look back at the purpose of your report, because if you remember why you were writing this report, then it'll give you a clue as to what kinds of recommendations you're going to come across. So if you were writing a report on whether somebody should go into assisted living housing, then the recommendations will be on whether that person should or not, and what kind of housing it should be. So you think about what your purpose was, and that will lead you to your recommendations. Your recommendations should be very much what the activity and your analysis of it point to. So you shouldn't have your recommendations ready before you start. I know that sounds obvious, but sometimes people do. We all do. We cheat a little bit. I want to recommend this. I'll write a report that leads to that. But that's not the proper way to do it. You might be recommending that you need to do more work on this. I've called it research, but of course it's not research in the technical sense, but it needs more looking into. It needs more assessment, or a different kind of assessment. You might be saying this activity that we've been reporting on needs to carry on. It's really good, or be done with other people, or be extended, or be amended. Maybe there's parts of it that you want to recommend are done differently in the future. And you also might be recommending that another report is done, but you might want to do your assessment of the situation in a different way. You might say, we need to report on this, but we need to next time look at this particular thing, or talk to these particular people that weren't done in the first report. So your first report has given you an opportunity to say where things need to go from now on. And that's your recommendations. They don't need to be fancy. They just need to be straightforward. This is what should happen now. Okay, sorry this is a bit of a lecture, but I'm just ploughing on and trying to get through everything. Do shout at me if you need to ask anything. So we're going to look at observational reporting and some principles behind it. Do you remember when we did the passage earlier on, we looked at the difference between an observation and a comment, or an analysis, or an opinion? Because an observation should be nothing to do with opinion, and that's harder than you think. So when you're reporting on an observation, when you're just saying what happened, and this is the part where you would, when we went through the structure and we got to the what actually happened, this is the bit we're now talking about. We're going back to that bit and looking at how you would report on your observations. So first of all, do remember to set the context. You're not trying to trick people into thinking, what on earth are they going on about? And you also don't want to repeat yourself. You don't want every time you mention somebody's switched their mic on and is now chatting. I don't know how we can get to them, but I'll plow on. So you may be that you want to refer throughout the report to something that happened, to a particular session where the venue set on fire and you all had to run outside. So make it clear how you are referring to that once, and then when you refer to it again and again, you don't have to describe it all again. You just have a way of saying it so the reader knows, oh yeah, they're talking about that. That's all. It's a common error to feel you've got to describe the whole thing again and again. Avoid bias. Now, this is a key one. I don't mean bias in the sense of prejudice or horrible discrimination. I don't need to teach you all about that. I'm sure you know much better than I do. I'm talking about really an individual bias that is quite subtle and you don't even notice. Sometimes it's just an assumption of a shared view. So remember when I talked about the weather? When somebody says, what's the weather like outside? If you come in and you go, oh, it's awful, you are assuming they share the view that torrential rain is awful. They might not. So you have to be very careful that you don't report on something that has happened with your view of it. It's called a value judgment, with your view of it hidden in the message. Somebody might have been longing for rain. They might have an allotment like we've got, and it really needs some rain. They might come from a very hot country, the desert, where it hardly ever rains, and they see rain as a joy. And so don't make those kind of assumptions. Really try to avoid that. Blanket statements are part of that. A big one being something like, it was a mess. I went in the house and it was a mess. Well, your version of a mess might be very different from my version of a mess. If I turned my computer around, you definitely see what some people call a mess. To me, it's home, and it's relaxed, and it's so your version of a mess might be very different than mine. So really watch out for that. We're going to do a little exercise, and we do need to split into breakout groups for this, please, Nyoka.
How many groups would you want?
Just groups of 3, 4 or 5 people. It's not
Okay.
not crucial. When you get into your groups, I want you to discuss these sentences. Just wondering if you'll be able to still see them. Will I be able to still see them when they're in groups?
Would you like that? Because I put you as a co-host, so you would be out, but you can join in anytime.
I've no idea what that means, but we'll go along with it. Just very glad to have Nyoka here, who knows what she's doing. Yeah, whatever works. I just want the screen that I've got up at the moment. I want this to be discussed in the groups.
Oh yeah, you would see the screen.
Yeah. So
Salli,
yeah.
How long would you like the session to be?
We're going to be 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay.
Have your pens and paper with you if you want to scribble any revisions of the sentences I've given down. And what I want you to do is just discuss in your groups, what have I said here in these sentences that could be considered bias, and how might you correct that? Okay.
Okay, they're all gone into their rooms.
You've put me in one, but I won't go in it. That's all
No,
right, isn't it?
you're not in any room, but at the bottom of your screen, you can join into any room. Would you like to join?
Clever stuff. No, I won't. I'll stay out and let people discuss. So go into your rooms and get going on that. So a few people would they disappear from my screen as they've gone?
Yeah, they're already getting into their rooms.
Okay.
Parul hasn't joined.
Oops. Didn't mean to do that.
Salli, would you like to go into any room? I can move you in
No,
between rooms.
no, I'll just stay, thank you, and let people get on without me.
Okay, some of them may not be able to get into the room if I guess they're using a phone. So it's
right.
Just Chelsea,
well,
Chelsea
anybody left who can still see the screen, that's okay. You can just look at it for yourselves. As I say, if you've got a pen and paper, you might make some notes. And when we come back, we can anybody can chip in.
Sally, I don't think your screen share is working. Did you share it?
Yeah, I've not moved it. It's still where it was before. So
So they're seeing it through their phone, but let me just check with the other groups if they're having the same problem.
perhaps we could just bring people back in if we're
You
not
want me
sure
to
of
do
it.
that?
Yeah, shall we?
It's anyways going to close in 10 seconds. So
All
they will
right,
be out.
that's fine. That's fine.
Okay, I guess they're all back.
Everybody back? Yeah. Oh, that was quick. Hello, everybody. Nyoka was letting me know that some people were struggling to see the screen while you were gone. So, but you can see it all now, hopefully. Maybe just 2 or 3 people, if you felt there was anything, any key issues that arose from looking at these or looking at them now, if you didn't have chance before. Where's the bias in one or more of these sentences? Someone speak up and help me out here.
Am I on? No, I'm just on mute. The home was not set up to ensure the safety of the child. Are we talking about a bias there regarding somebody stating their opinion of?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How was the home set up?
Yeah.
What do you consider to be safe or not safe? You could describe a home as having stair gates and locks on cupboard doors and tablets out of the way, and then in your conclusion say, we believe that because these precautions have been taken, it is a safe place for a child. But when you're actually describing it, because remember, these are, as it says, these are observations. It's not an observation, it's your opinion, really. The home was not set up to ensure the safety of the child, just your opinion. Nyoka?
Sally, could this also be an actual comment if you're looking at it from the point of view of maybe a person who looks at child safety as a profession and knows the guidelines and is then making her analysis? It would be factual.
It would, but it would be an analysis. It would be in the analysis or the comment bit when she's actually, assuming she's a she, that was a bit prejudiced of me, when she's actually describing the home and its safety for children, she needs to be describing what she actually sees. You know, I'm trying to think of, too long since I had any children. I'm trying to think of safety things, you know, stair gates, but it could be that she saw a home and it didn't have any of those safety features, but she still judged that the parent or parents were going to keep the child safe. I mean, I never had a stair gate. When my kids were growing up, for instance, somebody had come in and say the home is not set up to ensure the safety of the child, I would have been very, very concerned, because that is just an opinion. So yeah, what about the other ones? Any comments for anybody about where the bias is? These are just observations. You're all very shy.
There has been discrimination against for a long time. I think that one's a bias.
Yeah, that one is biased. It's a more subtle bias because, you know, it sounds like a reasonable thing to be reporting on, yeah, but on its own, just to say somebody's been discriminated against for a long time, it doesn't tell you what form the discrimination has taken. That would be an observation. And it also assumes that it is discrimination. Now, I'm being a bit harsh here because I think probably in a report most of us have got a common understanding about what discrimination involves, but nevertheless, it's a comment, it's an opinion, it's analysis, it's a conclusion. it's not an observation, unless you say, Daisy has experienced repeatedly people throwing eggs at her windows. That would be an observation. That's something that's actually happened. But to describe that as discrimination is to start to analyze it. Also, to say for a long time is just a little bit vague. A long time might be a week or years. So it depends on what your view of a long time is. I guess almost one of the lessons of this is just to be clear and specific. Don't give vague sense of what happened, because in a report, you need to evidence that. Okay, we'll move on. Thank you very much for doing that and indulging me. I mentioned this earlier, so I won't harp on about it, but it's just about, if you conclude that something has happened or that something is a certain way, you need to have evidenced that in your observation. So don't assume that the person reading will think, oh yeah, so that happened, so that means that. I think I mentioned to you that I used to do observations of parents and children in supervised contact situations and produce court reports. And you were really aware of this there, because you were producing a report for a judge. A judge is not an expert on child welfare or child psychology. So if you said the parent sat in the corner laughing, and your conclusion is this parent is cruel and neglectful, you've got to make that connection for the judge, because the judge might think a parent sat in a corner laughing, well, that's nice, glad they were happy. Not most judges aren't that stupid, but I'm just giving you a silly example. So yeah, make the connection for them. Going to look at words, at the language that you use. Now, I admit to having my own bias here. I hate Americanisms, for instance. Depending on the kind of report you're writing and the purpose that it's serving, you can be as strict or not as you like about these types of things. I think it looks unprofessional to use Americanisms when you're in Britain. You might not care about that. You might think, as my son does, language changes, spelling changes, we adapt. So I'm not saying that's a bad opinion. This is my view. Avoid Americanisms. Vary your words so you don't get stuck on the same thing all the time. We're going to come back to that in a minute. Use of the first person is important. Think about it. Whether you want to say, so I did this and I did that and we went there and we did that. A long time ago, reports tended to try and anonymize almost, or not be so personal. So they would even say, one of the producers of this report has had personal experience, and it kind of got a bit tied up in English. So on that one, I'm like, if you need to say I, say I, yeah? Don't get too tangled up in trying to distance yourself from what you're saying, yeah? But be clear who it is that's saying it. So if your report's at the bottom of if your name's at the bottom of the report, then you can talk about I or we, if it's several of you. If, however, you're writing a report for someone else and their name's at the bottom, then you'd avoid that. It's quite straightforward, really. My message really is, although I'm very strict on Americanisms, I'm not very strict on this kind of thing, whether you write in the first or the second person, because I think you can spend so long getting tangled up in that you don't get on with the report. So I would say just do what comes naturally and what sounds sensible and what makes sense to the reader. Political correctness. I'm not going to dwell on this one. It's similar to diversity issues I mentioned earlier on, which a lot of you know a lot more about than I do. But what I will say is political correctness, it's got a bad label, hasn't it? people say, oh, you're just being politically correct. Political correctness is there for a reason, so that we're not offensive, so that we don't use archaic terms that no longer apply, so that we're not prejudiced, so that we're not discriminating against people. The most common error against political correctness in reports is nothing to do with the modern issues. It's old-fashioned sexism. People will refer to a chairman instead of a chair, or a chairperson, though chair is perfectly adequate, or they will say he when meaning they. You know, one does this. Don't use one, it sounds just too highfalutin. One ought to try harder. They ought to try harder is fine, not he ought to try harder, unless you are talking about a boy or a girl. Think about who you are talking about, and use the terms that are suitable to that. I don't know if anybody's got strong opinions. Shout up if you have, or if you know a lot about it, about the use of BAME, Black, Asian and minority ethnic, very much around at the moment, partly because of COVID, etc. But there's been also a lot of reaction against it. A lot of people saying, well, I don't like that term. It's not me, you know. And so I think it is one you have to be very careful with, but you can apply the same principle when using that term. If you mean Black, Asian and minority ethnic people, then use that term. But I think you will find that more often than not, you don't actually mean every single minority ethnic person, which that term is coined for. If you're doing a massive research project, like about why COVID affects some people more than others, you might use the term BAME. But if you're talking about your project and you mean that Asian parents attending your parenting program responded in a different way than other parents, then say that, say Asian, don't talk about BAME. It's too broad a concept and an idea, and it means that you're just chucking people into a category which is prejudiced. It's not fair on people when you mean a certain kind of people. But it's an ongoing discussion, and I'm not the expert on it. Just talking about the wording you used on, obviously it's part of a much broader debate about how we refer to people. But the main thing is to try not to generalize.
Username here. How do you go to username? Because I think this is Hussein. Where is that?
Oh, I thought somebody was talking to me, but I think they're talking to somebody else.
Yeah, on the top of your name.
Okay, we're going to go.
I think you're unmuted again.
Oh, it doesn't. He says hide and video.
She'll come back to us, I'm sure. We're going to look now at, sorry, I'm just seeing if we're splitting again.
Where do you change the name?
Oh yeah, no, we're not. We're going to look at varying the words that you use. And one thing that a lot of people find they repeat or repeat without wanting to constantly are these kind of words. I'm going to describe, I'm going to examine, I'd like to explain. So I wonder if we could just take a minute to think about other words that you could use. Scribble them down if you've got a pen and paper. Other words you might use. So you're going through a whole report, and almost every paragraph needs to use a word like this. But what alternatives are there? What ones can you think of? Just take 60 seconds and scribble some down. I'm not going to test you on them. The next slide shows them.
It says humor. Yeah.
Humor is still struggling, I think.
No.
Could you mute them, please?
I've just muted her. I didn't know I could do that. Feels a bit rude, doesn't it, to mute somebody else? But think she was struggling. Okay, I feel like we should perhaps have a prize for the person who got the most, but we won't do that. Here's the ones I came up with. Woo, that was clever, wasn't it? First time I've used that. Here's the ones I came up with. So for describe, explain, examine, you can identify, discuss, analyze, review, outline, illustrate. And they're just the words that describe the process, really, of what you're doing and what you're talking about to people in your report. And there might be other terms that you use for other things, but this is just your describing words, I suppose. And it's just a way of varying so that you don't say the same thing all the time. And so they don't mean exactly the same. They're not complete synonyms, but you might find you can draw on one or the other at any particular time. So just the message is vary the words that you use so that it doesn't sound too boring and repetitive. I hope you can see that. Some of you may have heard of the Plain English group. It is actually a real group who lobby for things to, particularly leaflets and instructions, to be written in plain English rather than, we went through centuries really, but certainly decades of people trying to sound fancy by writing things in a fancy way. So the plain, this is just a joke, that the Plain English group would become the central subcommittee steering group for the facilitation of brevity and a clarity of language uses in the user provider communication interface. It's a joke, but it's really a way of giving you the message that you don't have to write things in fancy language. There's a reason for the Plain English group. There's a reason they exist, and it's because it makes things clearer for people. And your purpose when you write a report is not to confuse people. The reason it happens sometimes, I'm sure none of you ever do this, but the reason it happens sometimes is because people want to sound posher than they are. People want to sound fancy, and they think if they put in difficult to understand words and write things in a convoluted way, it'll sound really good. And it doesn't. It just makes it hard to understand. And I say this as somebody who does a lot of creative writing. I love the English language. I love the way that we can use it in lots of different ways. But the place to do that is not in a report that you want to be understood. Of course, you want it to be appropriate to your audience. So, I mean, if you're writing a complex document for neurosurgeons, I'm sure you all do that kind of thing all the time, then you'll want it to use their language and the appropriate scientific technology. But just be careful that you don't get too fancy. The other thing, at the same time, I'm not saying use bad English and write it in any old way. But one technique I often tell to people when I'm trying to help them write a report or any piece of lengthy writing is just write it as you would say it. Just write it, just get it written down. I even said this to my kids when they were doing their A-levels. Just write it, then go back over it and try and, you know, make it a bit clearer and fancy it up a little bit. But if you can spend ages poised with pen or at your keyboard, thinking, how am I going to say that? How am I going to say that? just say it. And you will probably find when you then read over it, actually more of it than you thought is okay. And you can rehash it to make it really, really good. There's some, this isn't mine. Oh, look, there's a typo there. Sorry about that. This isn't my chart. I stole it from somewhere. But you might want to just spend a couple of minutes looking at it and deciding which parts of it are relevant to you and which principles of plain English you agree with or don't agree with, because again, it's not law, and work through those. We'll do that. Let me just check the time. Yeah, we've got plenty of time. Now we won't split into groups yet. So we'll just spend, I've just given you that. Again, if anybody wants a copy of that, I'll try and find where I found it and send it to you. The basic principles are, as I've already mentioned, know who you're talking to. So you'll say different things to one audience than you would to another. You'll write in a different style. Write for them. Don't use words that they won't know. Don't follow silly rules because somebody once said to you, you've got to do it this way. If it doesn't make sense and it isn't clear, read it out loud to someone because that will pick up whether it's understandable or not, and make the text and design in one. What that means is if you're presenting an informal document that you hope people will laugh at and relax at, make the words match the style and the presentation that you're using. So they're just somebody else's ideas about principles of writing in plain English, and I hope you agree with them, but there is definitely room for disagreeing, and there's definitely room for exceptions where you think, oh no, I wouldn't do that on this occasion. No hard and fast rules. Ooh, my favorite, and I'm sure it's all of yours as well. What are your views on grammar and punctuation? Again, I have to say that there are different views on it. Some people don't think it matters at all. And if you're one of those, I have to respect your view, even though you're wrong. Grammar, I would say, matters in as much as it needs to sound professional. It needs to make sense. It needs to follow a few rules, but really fancy English grammar. If anyone's ever had somebody say, I can't even think of a sentence that you sometimes hear people say, you can't have a something at the end of a what's it. You can't end a sentence in for, F-O-R, for some reason, or of. Things I don't know of apparently is incorrect, and there's a proper way of expressing that. You may well all be experts in this. I would say don't worry about that kind of thing, but some certain parts of grammar, you just sound like a bit of a plonker if you get them wrong. And so we're going to cover a couple of them in a minute. Punctuation is different. That's your apostrophes in the main and your commas. Again, some of it, if you get it wrong, it changes the whole sense of what you're saying. And somebody reading it would be like, what? It would lose the sense of it. And also it would make people focus on the mistakes you'd made rather than what you're actually saying. And obviously you want them to focus on what you're saying, and you want them to take you seriously. You don't want them to think, well, look at them, they don't know what they're talking about. So just be careful with that. I think I've got an exercise, and we're going to separate into groups again, Nyoka, if that's okay. I want us in our separate groups to look at these 4 sentences. There's time to scribble them down if you think you're going to lose the screen when you go into groups. So I'll read them out, but if you're writing them down, you have to write them exactly as they are written. When I entered the room, he was sat on the bed. These have all got deliberate errors in them. They were very, very noisy. When I say errors, I mean, some of them are really clear errors. Some of them are just bad practice. John's mother cleaned Zara's truck, but didn't notice its broken wheel. Make sure you notice the punctuation in that one. And the last one is, she could have managed better. Yeah? Can we just separate into groups? And if you've got time in your groups, come up with, we'll do 3 minutes again, come up with alternatives, or just point out the errors in those sentences, or just pick on one of them if you want. Is that okay, Nyoka?
Yeah, do you all have the sentences? Because for some reason, I don't think the screen shares have going through to all the rooms. So if you have them, I would open the rooms right now.
Hopefully somebody in each group will have them.
I've taken a picture.
Oh, that's
Oh,
clever.
great.
Yeah. Didn't think of
That's
that.
a brilliant idea. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so if everyone has their picture, now I'm going to open the rooms. Thank you. Sally, how long would you like them to be in the
3
room?
minutes.
3 minutes. Okay.
Oh, everyone's gone into a group this time. That must have worked.
Yeah. No, I guess it's if they're on a phone and they don't have it. So yeah, it's just you who hasn't joined in.
Oh, somebody's come back. Abby.
I've been watching these grammar exercises with my daughter, and I find it so interesting.
Oh,
Every time.
I'm so glad I haven't got
Revisiting.
school-age kids now, because it's just gone silly, hasn't it? And adverbial frontage or something, isn't it? They have to do.
She's a lot better than I am. I've forgotten my grammar. Basic, yes, but so much more to revisit.
Well, I think the thing is, if you can spot when something's clumsily written or wrong, you don't need to know the terminology for that. You know, in life, you don't need to be able to describe that as a language teacher would do, as long as you just know that that's not the way you say it.
How it sounds and how it makes, yes.
Yeah.
I think they'll all be with us in the next 30 seconds.
Okay. How many groups did you divide people into?
Four groups.
Right.
So some of them have got 3 and some have got 4, but I guess in the last group we've got 2 people.
So
because of you being a part of it.
We could get some feedback from each one then.
Room 1 and 2 have got 4 each, yes.
Okay.
Okay. They're going to be with us now.
Everyone back?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Okay, I hope that wasn't too horrifying. I know it's not everyone's favourite subject. Let's have a little bit of feedback from each group in turn. So room 1, would somebody like to speak up? First person to speak in room 1. Just tell us what you thought, what you decided, what you focused on. Did you argue? Who's going to speak
Room
from
1 had Huma, Leila, Purul, and Chalesa. Shalesa, I hope I got the names correct. Pronounced.
Okay.
Anyone with any?
Pick on one of those, Nyoka. Tell them, ask them if they'll speak.
Huma, would you like to say something?
Actually, we didn't argue at all because we couldn't see the sentence. We were just trying to remember what were the sentences so we could do something. But I would say, I'm just looking at the sentence, and I would say that very, very noisy. It should not be like this. I mean, this is an opinion, and repeating again and again, very, very, this is just an opinion.
That's true. Yeah, the use of very, very is what I was hoping you would notice, and you have done. Very, very is it's not actually strictly speaking wrong. It's just totally unnecessary. Very, very. Even one very is usually too many. It was noisy. And then you presumably in context, you're going to say, what about it was noisy? So, you know, it's not going to need that emphasis, that modifier, as I believe it's called. I remember that one. So yeah, but definitely 2 veries. Avoid that in your report writing. Try and be as short and to the point as you can. That's good. Thank you. Can we have somebody from room 2?
Room 2 had Hilda, Joy, Judith, and Stephanie in it. Can we have someone pass their remarks on the same?
Okay, Stephanie. Shall I go for it? Yeah, we went through the list. The last one, she could have managed better. She could have managed better. That is so a bugbear of mine. That is used in language so many times.
It is.
The word have.
That's yeah, I'm so glad it annoys somebody else and not just me. We do tend to speak like that. It's just when it comes to be written down, it's just plain wrong, that one. I'm sorry. That is my opinion, obviously, not the law, but it's just plain wrong. And it makes you look unprofessional if you make that kind of very basic error. Can
I just say that everything and nothing and the other things that annoy me as well.
Oh, well, yes. Yes,
Sorry.
yes.
That's me finished.
But there is a divide, a huge divide on what's right and what's wrong. I'm only claiming that these things should be written in a certain way. You can speak how you like. I think, and obviously we all speak in our, you know, when we're being relaxed and with our friends and family, or in our culture. I'm thinking I speak very differently when I go home to Manchester than I do the rest of the time. But when you're writing something down, it needs to look and sound good. The reader needs to read it. It needs to be clear, flow correctly, and they don't want to be going, what? Half the time. So just be careful, and that is a very common error. So let's see if, so we've picked up on sentences 2 and 4 if they were numbered. Let's see if our next group, room 3, could pick up on one of the other sentences, 1 or 3 that we haven't done yet. Who's in the group 3, Nyoka?
Room 3 has got Anne, Dhruvangi, and Sharanjit.
One of those want to speak?
Hello.
Hello.
The first thing that I noticed was what has been said last. She could have managed. I think that got me. And I'll probably concentrate on the one I've not been dealt with. The John's mother cleaned Zara's. It's the punctuation smart for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you correct it for us?
It's supposed to be between N and S and H and S.
Yeah, so John's mother, it sounds like there's several Johns. If you put the apostrophe after John's,
Yeah.
that means the mother of the Johns. But we're presuming there's only one John. And so John's mother cleaned, and then, yeah, the same mistake here. Zara's truck. Must be loads of Zara's, and they all share the same truck. If you put the apostrophe there, it should go before the S. And there's one other in that sentence. Did you get that one?
Could there be a comma after truck?
There could be, actually. A lot of people put a comma before but. That's not the one I'm talking about, though. But that would be perfectly acceptable, yeah.
Where it says it and a comma in between S, it's broken.
That's correct. An apostrophe, you mean? Yeah, that's exactly right. It's ITS when it's talking about belonging. So the broken wheel belongs to it. It is an exception to the rule. If we were talking about the broken wheel belonging to John, we would say John apostrophe S broken wheel, John's broken wheel. But when you're talking about its broken wheel, it's an exception to the rule. I know this sounds, if you're not into this, it sounds a bit ridiculous, but it is a really common error. So try not to make it. When you write it's like that, it apostrophe S, it means it is. That's all. So that would read, but didn't notice it is broken wheel, which doesn't make sense, obviously. I think that's probably why the exception exists, so it doesn't get mixed up. So there should be no apostrophe there. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, could you replace it with the? But didn't notice the broken wheel.
Yeah, that would be fine. Didn't notice the broken wheel, yeah. Because it would be obvious that it was the broken wheel of the truck. Sometimes you do need to think about that. Would it sound like it was a broken wheel of something else? If you make sentences very long, sometimes you can lose. Well, what's the broken wheel? Whose broken wheel is it? But in that sentence, yeah, that would be fine to say didn't notice the broken wheel. Yeah. Okay, and our final group 4. If you could say anything about the first sentence, that would be brilliant.
In first sentence, what I found, like when I entered the room, he was sitting on the bed. That's
Yes, you got it. Brilliant. Such a common error. Even my own kids do it. It's horrible. And I always say to them, and the reason I put when I entered the room at the beginning of this sentence is because if I'd have put he was sat on the bed, it actually does make sense if it was a baby or a small child and somebody had picked him up and sat him on the bed, then he has been sat on the bed. But we very rarely use something in that form. What we mean is he was sitting on the bed. And it applies to standing and singing and all kinds of verbs. They're verbs, aren't they? So when I entered the room, he was sitting on the bed. Now, again, my son would say, Mum, it doesn't matter. But he's wrong. It does. It sounds, actually, what it sounds like is it sounds colloquial. So it sounds sloppy. You could say it to your friends, not me if I was your friend, because I'd get really cross, but you could say it to your friends, but you wouldn't hear it on the BBC or read it in the Guardian, which is always my measure. He was sitting. It's without going into the complexities of it, I don't know them. It's just an error. If you've picked somebody up and sat them down, then that's the correct use of the word sat. but if they've done it themselves, they are sitting. Okay. Strangely, in past tense, he sat on the bed would be okay, but not he was sat on the bed. I think I used to explain it as he was already puts it in the past tense. So then you don't need the sat to, it would be like a double past tense if you need to know that, which you don't. So they're just common. I'm sure the internet must be loaded with basic grammar and punctuation errors if you want to do some research. I know it's not everyone's favorite subject, can't understand why, but it's not. So if you want to scout about and have a look, do just the main ones to be wary of when you're writing your reports. Okay, thank you. You all did brilliantly at that, much better than I expected, so well done. We're almost at the end now. When you've written your report, the most important thing is to make sure that somebody else reads through it or sees it before you do your final, turning it into a fancy PDF and issuing it out to the world or getting it published. You might use what I've called a shared space for editing. You know that thing I showed you on the shared drive earlier on today? You can put things on there and anyone can edit them. So anyone can contribute to them and play around with something. And that's one way of doing a report. Even if you've written it and it's all your work, it's worth getting other people to input to that. If you don't want them to actually change it permanently because you want to know what they've changed, then just make sure that that's clear in your instructions to them and they use comments in the editing thing. If the technology of that is too difficult, you can literally hand it to somebody or send it to them in an email and they can make their changes and send it back to you. If you do that with lots of people, you can end up with like 12 different versions of a document and you're looking for slight changes. So sometimes pays to have only one document, one person makes their changes and you decide whether you like them or not, and then it goes to another person. You don't need 12 people to check your document, but you need at least one. You can use, if you've got the time, you can kind of almost use yourself as that person. So if you leave a big gap, I'd say at least 2 weeks between you completing your report and you then reading through it, you will find that enough time has gone for you to notice things that you didn't notice the first time round. The first time round, you can read through something and it's a mistake and you can look at it 12 times and you just don't see it because you're so into it. You need to remove yourself from that and come back to it, and you will find then you'll spot more of the errors, but better still, get somebody else to do it. There will be disagreements over what's right and what's wrong, and if it's your report, then you have the ultimate say over that. But it's very useful for people to spot errors in grammar, punctuation, expression, word use, but also just typing errors. I made one on an earlier screen. So that happens, and it's useful to get them to do that. Reading it aloud is the daftest thing ever, but it's unbelievably valuable. If you actually read something out loud to yourself, you will find that you notice the mistakes far more than you would if you didn't. And you will notice, you'll think, oh, that goes on a bit, or blimey, when's the end of this sentence coming? Or I don't even get what that means, and I wrote it. You know, you will start to critique yourself. Really, really valuable to read it out loud. Hopefully not sitting in an office with everyone else, but now we all work from home, it's not that hard, is it? So that's editing and proofreading, and I would say you can't spend too long or enough, give that more attention than it needs, because it needs a lot. So really focus on that. I used to be what they call a copy editor and proofreader. That was actually my job, so it kept me in a job, the need for that. It is amazing how many mistakes people make. I've called this homework exercise because I didn't think we'd have time to do it, and I thought you might all be getting fed up by now and needing a cup of tea. But we've got a couple of minutes, so I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just show it you rather than send you off with it. But you can. Oh, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put that. Can't do that. I'll put that link into the chat, and then if you want to go to it you can, or you can go to it afterwards and download it or have a go at it. But for now I'll just use these, so I'm going to stop sharing that. Just give me a moment. Sorry to take so long.
I have also left a link for the Survey Monkey for feedback from everyone on this training, so we can get you more trainings from Salli and any other requirements that you have. So please send us your feedback.
Thanks, Nyoka. That's great. I've put a link there now. It's the latest thing in chat if you want to go to it. But I'm going to actually try and do a screen share. There we are. So you won't be able to play around with this one on the screen share, but if you go to the link, you'll have this that you can actually amend or just download it and play around with it in your own time. So it's the conclusion from a report. It's a really dreadful report, so don't worry too much about it. But it's not got, I hope it hasn't got punctuation errors. That's not what we're after here, or grammar so much as just it's a waffly report that mixes a few things and makes a few mistakes that you should by now know about. And I know that you could do a much better version of it. And I very much doubt that many of you will, because no one likes homework, but it really would help if you did just spend 5 minutes having a look at it and seeing if you can do anything to improve it. If you have any questions about it after the session, by all means get in touch with me, not a problem at all. Send me your version of it and I'll comment if you like. It'd be just like being at school. But it's just a conclusion to a report, and it makes some basic errors that we have discussed previously, and so feel free to have a go at that in your own time. I'm going to stop that share now. How long have we got? We've got 1 minute. So do as Nyoka has requested and fill in the evaluation. As I said, I'm evaluation officer, so it's the most important part of anything. So please do let us know what you think. And I know that Toby is going to send out the slides and another document that I've produced, which is about the structure of a report. If you want anything else, templates, any of the exercises we've done, just let me know. If you have any questions, or you'd even like me to come back to you in a one-to-one session over anything, or you want to send me a report for comment or any help, absolutely fine. I think I gave everybody my email address yesterday, but I'll just type it in the chat. Because it's very hard to cover everything in 2 short sessions. But you've all done brilliantly. It's been a pleasure to have you on board, and I wish you all the very best with all your lovely, lovely report writing as the weeks, months and years go by. And that's the end of me.
Thank you so much, Salli. It was a really, really interesting session. I'm sorry I missed yesterday.
No worries. You can.
But I will go
catch
through
up.
the recording. If anyone wants to revisit the training, we have it recorded and we will be
Oh,
putting it
yeah.
up on the site. And for slides, Toby will send out the slides. I believe someone also wanted the evaluation report template. So if that is also a part of the document you'd be sending, Toby, Salli?
Yeah, I hadn't said I would, but I will. Yeah, I'll make a note to do that. Haven't done it yet, so I will. Yeah. But yeah, anyone wants anything directly from me, do get in touch. But I will, yeah, I'll send that to Toby so you can let him know. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to click leave now.
Bye. Have a good
Thank
day.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye.
lovely day.
Bye. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.